Hey Brainiacs, the Broken Brain Book Club first meeting will be this Monday, July 11th. Watch the social medias to learn more and to get the link. Dr. Jess Wright will be talking to us about A Stream to Follow, which is his historical fiction novel about an army doctor who comes home in World War II times and has to deal with PTSD. To get a hold of the Zoom link to join the club, just go over to Twitter @BreakABrain, Facebook.com/BreakABrain, or Instagram @Brainiacs Ahoy. We'll see you then.
The Broken Brain.
Recording in progress.
Everybody out there knows that everyone's agreed to listen. In fact, you get a pop-up, don't you? I didn't know that. I was on somebody else's podcast, and I didn't know that you got a pop-up because I was on someone else's Zoom call that said,
yeah, you're on the other end of it.
Here.
Oh, gee, I get to click a button and say yes.
Yeah, is it okay to record? So I didn't even know that everybody was giving permission through Click as well. So this is an exciting conversation that we're going to be talking about today. The book, it should say it's 3 books, but now you can get it as 1 volume.
Yep, 1 volume, yay!
It is Batman: The Three Jokers, and I always forget. So it's Geoff Johns as the writer here, and it looks like Jason Fabok and Brad Anderson. That's the name. I always forget is the third name. Are the animators here? And we were just getting ready and talking about the little bit of shift here from some of the things we've been talking about with Marvel. And, Moon Knight and some of the stuff we've just put out recently with some of those, and then switching to talking about, first of all, comic book, a different format. And also new enough that I don't think there's any other adaptations. This has not been used anywhere else. So it's kind of a new thing. And also a little dark.
Oh, yeah. But again, keep totally in keeping with the larger canon and the larger legacy. Like there was a lot of things where it was definitely giving me like Killing Joke vibes and stuff like that. So
yeah, no, it absolutely, and it's very interesting where this work kind of came from. We're going to go into some of the different elements of this. It's very, as far as psychological stuff, it's very Batman. One of the really interesting things that I think that we will get into a little later is you and I always make this comment that, a few sessions of EMDR or some type of trauma therapy and Batman may not be Batman. And that actually factors more heavily into this than I would have thought even when I started reading this story. When you get to the end and it's like, oh, Batman does get trauma therapy in this story. Kinda, not recommended method, but we'll get into that. The premise for anybody who doesn't know, and so I figured maybe I'd start out and just give I'll give a spoiler-free kind of synopsis, and then from that point on, dear listener, listen at your own risk for there will be spoilers because we're going to talk about all the different implications of it, but. The premise of this is that there's a gradual discovery that Gotham PD and Batman start to make is that there's actually 3 Jokers, literally, right up front, title of the story. That there are actually 3 individuals that are perpetuating all of these Joker-related crimes. And essentially what they figure out is that these 3... that one of them is the first Joker and that they have been using psychological, physical, and chemical torture to create other people with the Joker problem, if you will. If that was it's as if in this case, it's a small epidemic of Jokerism is something you can, it's always great in comics and stories where you can reliably mimic falling into a vat of toxic chemicals like this.
Oh boy, like just somehow the chemical batch
same outcome
still there, and well, and it plays with other things like when people, for example, cloning or other ways of replicating one. This is the Joker's version of that kind of thing. Yeah,
it's like Batman. If you can't kill the Joker, at least shut down this chemical factory.
Yeah. Somebody drain the pool.
Somebody do something. But and the interesting thing. Well, we'll get more into that, but kind of the synopsis of the beginning of the thing is that they discover quite up front that there are 3 Jokers, and for some reason, the 3 of them are no longer pretending to be one. They're just throwing this in everyone's face that the gang's all here. And the premise then becomes as if they are searching for the perfect Joker. They are trying to make the perfect Joker. Seems to be their plot. And the story revolves around Batman, Batgirl, and the Red Hood, who is anybody who's read Under the Red Hood or anything would know is Jason Todd, Batman's former Robin that was either almost murdered or actually murdered, depending on what. Well, maybe we'll get into that. I don't know. By the Joker, who's murdered by the Joker in Death in the Family. So, and I will say, if anybody is going to read this, you don't really have to, but if you want to know some of the setup for this, you already mentioned The Killing Joke, Death in the Family, Under the Red Hood wouldn't be a bad one to read before if people want to know why is Jason Todd the killer vigilante known as the Red Hood.
But I have to say the one thing that they did well was give as the story unfolds, how these different pieces of information in the background, they're revealed that you could literally read this cold. Yes. And get a sense. Like it's again, doesn't go into the minutia, whatever, but there's enough there that you're like, oh, I get it, as opposed to why is this so random or whatever. And I think they did that again for the size of this and for what's in there. The fact that, definitely read those other things. There's whole bunches of layers, but really well done for being able to pick that up, integrate it.
This is, and I'd forgotten, looking at this now as one volume, this is originally 3 issues. There were 3 issues of a comic. There's the larger size. I mean, we're probably talking 30 to 50 page issues each, but that's not a whole lot of real estate when you're working with graphic work like this.
No.
And so, to have as much in there as they do, it also is a nod towards, I think, modern comic storytelling, which is a little more inclined to be inclusive, I think. I hope, anyway. It seems like, instead of being like, well, unless, Daryl Mansell, who's been on my show, he's the creator and proprietor of the Paprika network of fandom and things he's been on. I remember a year or so ago, he laid out the reading chart that you need if you want to follow the Bill Hickman's journey through Marvel with the Fantastic Four and all of a lot of stuff that actually might be pulled into for the new phases in Marvel and the MCU. Cool. But it was like, it was like 20, 30 books worth. And it was like, you read Fantastic Four number 16 over here and this over here and this over there. The fact that charts like that exist at all is actually really cool and an invitation for non-comic readers to get into comics. But I feel like, there's maybe a little bit less of that saying like, well, if you didn't read Batman and the Silver Age number 16 of this one and Detective Comics this and
like, to me, well written things. I mean, don't get me wrong. Sometimes there are particular threads where they're their own little self-contained, universe or whatever. But something like this, again, is a great example of you can have the nod, you can have the interconnection, but, there's not like a little memo on the inside that says, here's your homework before you crack the cover open. Please proceed to read the following back. Like, I'm sorry, I'm not coming into a university class with a prereq required.
Or we're not even going to tell you what you should have read. You just should have read it, dummy. Is like the mentality.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that gatekeeping in nerddom is going out of vogue, and I love it. I love that it's dying.
Me too, because to me it's all about accessibility, and I would much rather have somebody effectively walk into the middle of something and have it be so good and so engaging that they go back and they deep dive and they find all these other things, as opposed to oh, you watched that? Oh, and you didn't get it? Well, that's because, and it's like, no, you're, again, that kind of gatekeeping and snobbery is just, it's not the endearing trait, or it's not the mark of, I think this is the other part, is when people get into fandom and they consider it like a competitive sport. And you're like, no, it's not a competitive sport. This is, it's sort of like the same thing with bands, where it's the whole, I was listening to them before they were popular, and then once they became popular, they sold out. And it's like, no. Good on you that you got them early. And it's nice to see, that they hit stride, or, hit that, the zeitgeist was such, whatever, like, but, again, kind of like the, insert name of famous band that played at weird, like, grungy basement joint that 50 people only showed up to. But then that if you go on like the internet for 5 minutes, apparently 5,000 people were all at that show.
Yeah.
It's the same thing it's the same thing with the fandom. Oh, well, you don't understand this, or gee, they went and changed this in this movie because in blah, 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 it's really this. And you're like, I really don't care if they, if they tweaked a character's powers or they tweaked a storyline in a way that better suits or maybe even deals with some other kind of whole problem or whatnot that was there. I would rather that if it's more authentic to the overall thing of the character, as opposed to, well, issue such and such on page 32, if you look at the lower left-hand panel. Excuse me, do you have a life?
Absolutely. Well, so I will say I'm going to say that's probably enough teaser for anyone who wants to read it and doesn't want it spoiled. You might want to hit pause, go read it immediately. Don't do anything else first, and then come back and hit unpause or the pause button again, and you can hear the rest of our conversation. That's the only way. Don't do anything else first. Just do that. And we're good. So from here on out, no guarantees actually guarantee there will be spoilers.
Yeah. It's just going to be a string of spoilers.
And, so within the realm of this comic, and it works well because you could view it as kind of a what if thing that kind of goes off on the side of what if there were 3 Jokers. Yeah. Or if you want to, you can fold it into continuity because once again, spoiler alert, by the end, there is only one. Not everybody makes it through this one alive.
Yeah.
And the fascinating thing that we see up front is that of these 3 Jokers, and they give them each labels.
Yes.
And this is really interesting because you've got the criminal, the clown, and the comedian.
Yeah.
And people may or may not realize how this ties in. You've got the criminal Joker is sort of more representative, I think, of like Jack Nicholson portrayed Joker.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. And I think he was even drawn that way. There was enough of a thing that you were like, oh, he looks a lot.
He's a little He's a little older and thicker than the other 2 Jokers, right? And you've got the clown, which is more like the sort of silver, Bronze Age, golden, whatever, the old comics, where a little more silly, a little more murdery than Cesar Romero, but a little more of that kind of where that was drawn from.
Mm-hmm.
And then
as if that show, like as if Cesar Romero, they were doing like an R-rated version. If you'd been, if it wasn't, all the camp, but with a little bit more,
a little more murder, torture.
Yeah.
And then you've had the comedian who, and I'll just go ahead and say that now. There's the one who survives to the end, and is the one who at least implies heavily that he may be the actual guy that he turned the other 2 into Jokers, although he won't. I think the last comment he makes about it is, "Oh, I'm sure the criminal who he murders as part of in the middle of the plan for no great reason other than he just wants to." He said, "I'm sure he regrets." How did he put it? "I regret making him, or maybe he regrets making me. You never know."
Yeah.
But he's much more representative.
And that's the other part, that whole ambivalence about it, and how, and even the whole, what the boss thinks, oh, well, you think you're the boss, one of us has to be, so that like they, even amongst themselves, there is that whole chicken and egg, who started it, and the idea of creating more, and the idea of making like the perfect Joker, and that this is really part of a larger thing. And that's, but what I loved about it was, that it played with aspects of personality. So again, there was the Venn diagram where each of them overlapped.
And you see where I think the Killing Joke really launched, and somebody out there may want to tweet at me or something and get at me if I'm wrong about the chronological order here, but I think the Killing Joke and Death in the Family were 2 of the big ones that ultimately, this is more of the Heath Ledger style Joker. This is more of the modernized Joker, who is not really that funny, but he thinks he's hilarious. And no one else finds anything funny that he does, but he does, which makes him scarier even. Yeah.
Well, honestly, exactly. And I think there's that part of it, which again, like the layers of the darkness, the different, I think is a really interesting premise, because again, we have seen different variations. And again, you're referencing the different actors that have played it as sort of embodying like archetypes or variations of them. And so the idea of bringing them all in together and seeing how they work together, they function or dysfunction, and play off each other to meet different agendas. And that, again, sometimes shared, sometimes differing. And that ultimately, so again, when are they playing well together? When are they actually, at each other's throats? How do they, how does this all work out? And the idea that they purposely did, 3 things simultaneously to ensure that people knew that there were 3. And then also even how Joe Chill is referenced, because there was the assumption by some, that he was still somehow tied into it. And it's like, oh, dude's on life support. Clearly he was, not a part of this.
It's this, and it just gets into some really, there's some cool meta thing going on here too, because people have talked about how maybe they missed and now we have these names, right, for him. People miss the clown version or the criminal version. And it's mostly then turned into like, nowadays, most depictions and most storylines are the comedian version, right? The more dark and twisted kind of version. And it really delves into kind of the sort of aesthetic of this Batman-Joker relationship and hits on some very interesting things along the way. One of the things that people may or may not be aware of course, is Barbara Gordon, who is Batgirl, and her backstory in The Killing Joke being purposefully shot, not with the intent of death, but to be paralyzed. The Joker purposely paralyzed her. In this version, and I know that I've seen this go different ways in different comics, she, while paralyzed, becomes the character Oracle, who is sort of Batman's tech support guy in the chair character, right?
Yeah.
To quote, what's Ned from Spider-Man.
Spider, exactly, the guy in the chair.
and in this version, she has regained somehow, through maybe by being, as people like to talk about, the Dark Knight Rises, right? Maybe by spending time in an underground prison. I think that's how you heal chronic back injury, right?
That's, I'm sure if you check on the Mayo
Back
Clinic site, that's exactly what they would, recommend.
You got some elderly prisoner,
or maybe it was
punch
John
you in the
Hopkins.
back.
I can't remember. Yeah,
Yeah, they don't, without going, they don't really say how, but she has regained. She does walk. She has overcome that condition in the sense that she is now functionally Batgirl again. And then we have Jason Todd, who was murdered by the Joker and left for dead, is kind of how they play it off this.
Yeah.
I think in the greater DC canon, he was brought back to life through Superboy punching a hole in the universe or some bullshit. I don't remember, but it was something.
Yeah. Again, that was one of those ones, again, if we're talking about somebody can pick up and read this one, it was like of all the things that we're going to do to make them not, that's not the rabbit hole we're going to go down. That's going to just suck up way too many panels and brain cells.
Exactly. We're really going to talk about some weird, So this is also, for those who want to read it, it's a story that can exist just in Gotham, whereas some DC stories have to exist in a world with aliens and monsters and gods and creatures too. And this one does not require that magic.
Yeah.
But so the two of them, I think it's kind of interesting to show how the two of them also have this traumatic damage that they're carrying around from their interactions with the Joker. And also, the thing I think is interesting is, you could say particularly with Jason, but they also have trauma from their association with Batman.
Well,
so this whole Batman and the Joker, it's traumatic to know either of these guys.
And just the multifaceted, interconnected, like the proverbial tangled web there, and how that implicates all of them. And especially in terms of, like, if you look at, Jason's storyline, like where did the damage start, in the sense that the path that he's gone down, especially with the idea that there's, in this effort to make the perfect the perfect Joker, he's seen as, well, you've already taken on the Red Hood name, and despite the fact that I did damage to you, you blame Batman, but then Batman really started you off on this path. And so it's this weird interconnected thing where you're going, like this guy's just got the different, like, he's effectively become like somebody else's experiment in terms of oh, look, he's already got this and this. If I just double down on that and add this, but oh, wait a second, I get to do that, but somebody else gets to take the blame. So that adds an extra layer of special sauce onto this whole little trauma soup we've got going on. And just the idea that, and that's where I think that darker comedian part comes in, because it is literally like a game. Like there's not there's not the criminal intent, nor is it all seen as a joke, like where it's all funny, haha, camp and wackiness, and just doing weird stuff for the sake of like, I like to see things go boom or whatever. It's that idea of, like there's some really serious messed up stuff, and I personally find it funny, even though everybody else for some weird reason finds it horrifying and doesn't see the joke. And you're like,
And they capitalize very well on the hypocrisy of that character being like his whole guiding belief, his only principle is chaos. And yet at the same time, and this is something people point this out as if it was a flaw in The Dark Knight. I take an issue with it though, because I don't think it's a flaw. They say, Heath Ledger's character of the Joker has this big dialogue where he says, "Oh, I'm just a dog chasing a car. I don't know what I'm doing." And it's like, if you did everything that he accomplished in that movie, it would take coordination of hundreds of people, and like tens of thousands of dollars, and it would have all of these things. And people point that out in a funny way. But to me, actually, that actually plays into this version of the Joker to say, "No, it's me. I'm all about chaos, Batman." And then he tells him in the end, when there's this confrontation, my favorite part actually is the conversation. But he basically tells him, "Yeah, I put this into effect. Then I did this. Then I did that. Then I did this." And it's like, dude, you're the biggest hypocrite to say it's all chaos. I don't care, but I'm going to make sure that I have it planned down to the last second of here's exactly what I know is going to happen. And so there's a lie, which I think is interesting in there too. And
I think it's interesting. And to me, that also plays into the narcissism of the character, because, and again, I'm not going to name names, but I know some folks, through my life experience, where part of their operating model for maintaining control as narcissists was create the illusion of chaos, and that you're doing everything by the seat of your pants, or that things are outside of your control is usually the way it plays out in real life. You act like, I don't know, I'd have to check I'd have to check with my assistant. I really don't know. And meanwhile, it is this kind of, no, this is my way of controlling information or controlling the situation. I just act like I'm caught in the flow like everyone else. And it's a way of destabilizing folks. So that's where it's, like I said, it is kind of, it's hypocrisy, or it's hypocrisy-ish in the sense that you've revealed enough about this to go, oh, wait a second. No, this is the branding and the sales speech and the what I'm putting out there, but this is the actual mechanics. And if you can just buy the shiny object up front, that'll actually make it, you're never going to suspect that I'm organizing this. Because I've made it look so chaotic and organic.
And I never thought of it in terms of this until you were saying, but he's gaslighting everyone.
Oh, yeah,
right?
exactly.
He's gaslighting Gotham, which is a whole nother book, actually, Gotham by Gaslight. Anyway, that's a little deep cut for any nerd listeners out there. And when you talk about that with, I thought it was very fascinating with Jason and how he is being experimented upon. One of the great underlying factors that's there in the Batman angst catalog, if you will, if you're looking for stories, future Batman writers and stuff to mine, there is that Batman always has this huge conflict about in how he brings these Robins in, right?
Yeah.
Jason, in fact, probably the most of all, because even after he discovers that he's not dead, right, there's a great deal of pain, a great deal of guilt that he has of even bringing him into the Robin role in the first place. Even when they're eager participants of being Batgirl into, the role and supporting, and not only supporting but encouraging. And you see this where it's not, it's a subtextual thing oftentimes but Batman is so desperate, really desperate deep down for someone who has empathy and gets him and whatever, that he'll take a 16-year-old out with him fighting crime, which seems, awful, I mean,
slightly morally and ethically problematic.
Right.
Who knew?
Right. I mean, I get, I guess you got the Tony Stark, Peter Parker thing from the MCU still. And it's like, but we
without
watch
the
that and
little,
it's
here's
like,
the
that's a
window that
little,
you operate in.
right.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
no conversation in the back of the limo with, this is the
Right.
small
Very
place you
much.
live
Yeah,
in.
very much. And so, I think even the most I think is Damian the latest Robin. I'm not really sure. Damian Wayne. There might be someone since then.
I have to admit, I've lost track. The pandemic
Yeah.
has done a lot of things to my
But-
brain and my habits.
his own son, I think was 12 when he joined as Robin. But then again, he was also trained by the League of Shadows as an assassin. So that's a whole nother ethical thing that he didn't do part of.
Yeah, you're gonna do this the family business. At least wait until somebody's, I don't know, hit the age of majority or
That's
something.
Exactly.
Like,
Yeah, right. You don't only have a driver's license. You can't drive the Batmobile legally, but so you get into that relationship there where Batman feels very guilty, and it pops up when we actually have the character Jason Todd actually murders the clown character, right? Just shoots him, and he just does that,
And he's out for all of them too. Like it's the
Yeah.
whole like I'm out to put a bullet in each one of them. I don't care how many there are.
Right. And one of the fascinating components of this story is the discussion that Batgirl witnesses this. And once again, there's even a dialogue with them that I thought was very interesting, which was when she says, "You did this." She tries to stop him. He says, "Yeah, you get it though." And she's like, "I don't get it at all. I tried to stop you." And he's like, "When's the last time you, would she throw a batarang at him or something?
Yeah.
When's the last time you missed when you were doing that? What you didn't stop. When's the last time you failed to stop someone you were trying to stop from doing something?"
Stop. Yeah. Like you didn't really aim that the way you would have otherwise. Yeah. That was a half-hearted effort. Thank you for going through the motions because you get it.
And I'm interested. I want to know what you think of this too. It was interesting to see Batman initially. His reaction was, "Well, what he said, I'll talk to him." She's like, I'll talk to him. Shouldn't we arrest him? And he's got reasons. I mean, there's practical reasons why that's not a good idea. Because that would have to, he's like, if you're going to testify at trial, they'll unmask you.
Yeah.
Which will unmask me, which will unmask,
And then it becomes that whole weird loyalty, larger picture. Well, what I found interesting about that was this kind of thing where he was, in a sense, a father figure, put in that father figure role, and that the kind of conversation that you're hearing there, it was very much like two siblings, and this is the outcome of living, how dad treated us kind of thing, and he did this for you and not me, and this is why this and that, and then the on one level understanding of each other, but at the same time, because of the differences, it was definitely the we've both been through some stuff, but I turned out this way. Why didn't you this, that, and yeah, da, 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 da. And then with Jason, it's wait a second, but you got the support, you got this, you got that. I was left for dead. And this sense of, it wasn't like they were playing, our term I use in our family is when people get into the pain Olympics. It's like, hey, we're all on the podium. Don't start punching each other for who gets the gold medal.
That's perfect,
that
though.
thing. Yeah. And this is where, and so as a result, he couldn't understand things. And then there was this again, and it was said and unsaid in different places, but and the conversation happened more between Barbara and Bruce around the idea of, well, I thought he was more like you. I thought he would,
That's exactly right. Right.
And then there's my own guilt. Like when I realized what happened, when I thought he was this and had my own guilt and baggage around that. And then, oops, he's not dead. And again, it very much reminded me of that parenting thing and again, I was wondering, okay, is this gendered or not, in terms of, again, the difference between, oh my gosh, my little princess is hurt, what'll I do, versus no, son, suck it up, like that kind of, perpetuating the gendered parenting that's happened in the past. And now, saying, well, no, actually boys are allowed to cry. And if your son falls down, you're allowed to comfort him the same way that you would comfort your daughter. Like you don't, both are allowed the same pain, the same whatever, or even the understanding that they might be going through things that are similar, but they're still different. And they're also different individuals and with different supports, baggage. And again, not like Jason wasn't walking into this with extra layers of baggage and less support in the first place compared to Barbara. So there was that other part. And so, yeah, it really struck me as like, that little dynamic there was definitely like referencing or paralleling family dynamics. And well, dad gave you this, but didn't give me that. and that's why I'm pissed at dad. And even seeing him lash out, because I think there was even that backlash towards, again, what do you do as far as responding? And again, the Batman code of ethics, where it's like, you do the different things, you arrest, you this, that, and whatever. And Jason just being at the point, like, don't you think I would have liked to have put a bullet in him? Yeah, but you didn't. I did.
Yes.
And so that idea that it was the, you brought me up in this, but you didn't do it right. So I'm going to take it to the next level. And, it's like, yeah, but that involves murder. And that's where, again, Barbara's doing the whole, but hold on.
And, there's an added component that's very interesting, because you could say they all have it different in a way. But one of the differences is, of course, that outside of this little bat family, as they often call it, is that Barbara has a whole support system in addition to that, which of course is her dad, Commissioner Gordon, which I also love the interaction there when Batman's like, so does he know you're Batgirl? No, of course he doesn't. And then at the end when he's like, hey, you're not dating the Red Hood, are you? And she's like, stay out of it, Dad.
Yeah.
In costume, right? Essentially, it's none of your
Okay.
business who I'm dating, Dad. She texts Dad on the end, and
exactly. And that,
so,
and that was interesting too, because again, it was that idea that in a sense, there's these two, again, one's the actual dad, but one's got a similar role. And then again, this character that's on one level, yes, you could say simultaneously a sibling, and at the same time is this other injured, damaged person that she understands. And again, that there would be that kind, the potential for that kind of attraction, because of the fact that it's one of the few people that gets it, and the empathy and the wanting to help and seeing the difference. So yeah, it was that thing. And again, even that understanding, is Jason a murderer? And this is also what's that stuff that gets into the, anti-hero versus villain aspect of it. And that I think what I see, especially in light of what we've been seeing coming through the MCU and the different conversations, and then even watching how stuff is unfolding in terms of the fandom, is that, what you see there with Jason is very much akin to, or has a parallel to, Wanda in terms of that. So yes, it's not like there's a shortage of trauma going around. Everybody's getting a nice heaping serving. But some people are getting support or have support networks, and others aren't. And gee, surprise, surprise, the folks where there's something lacking in that department, going off on the deep end and going from that, am I, hero, anti-hero, and am I a villain, or does this character become a villain or not? And that fine line, and watching how some characters, that's one of the things that I've noticed since, to go off at again, little MCU tangent, since Multiverse of Madness, is watching the vilification of Wanda as becoming a villain. And you're like, no, this is not a villain. Do not love, she's a raging ball of unhealed trauma, and she's an anti-hero. And again, kind of, it would be the parallel in the MCU to Jason here, where he's just got bigger doses that people, and that people's lack of understanding, empathy, compassion, and support for him is pouring gas on that fire, and then allowing him to be, vilified, called all these different things, which then again pulls away even more support. And then frankly, it's one of those things, people internalize the messages that they're getting about themselves. So in a sense that then, you run the risk of it becoming the self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah. And you see, if anyone's interested and hasn't read Under the Red Hood, if I'm saying the right one, I think that's the one where you discover, and we haven't probably mentioned, I guess that the Joker was the Red Hood for a while. I haven't really read those, but that's where he's talking about, why did you put on this hood if, you hate me so much? But one of the really fascinating things about that story is that Jason essentially, after having, in his rejection of Batman and his hatred of the Joker, takes on the persona the Joker took on and keeps doing the work that Batman trained him how to do. He just does it with murder as a potential component. Like, you can kill a guy, he can kill someone, and his lexicon of rules. And so you see that
because that's justice. Like, if nobody else is going to do the justice, I will do the
then I'll do
justice.
that.
Yeah.
And he really becomes sort of the DC Punisher in that way, I guess you could say. But
Yeah.
yet there's still this attachment that he has, this desire for this acceptance. There's a great exchange. It's funny, but it's a great exchange where early on in the story he gets in the Batmobile, and it's this kind of like I don't know, estranged son coming for a ride, and he tells him, Bruce, why is the passenger seat in the Batmobile, every time you change Batmobiles, the passenger seat is always so uncomfortable. I think you just don't want anyone in here with you. And Bruce just says, you're projecting.
Yeah, exactly. I love that one.
Right.
But yeah, like, it is one of those things where you're like, okay, so, is it true? Is he projecting? In a sense, not a wrong assumption, especially if you're the big burly guy and maybe he, again, the guy that's always in the car has maybe allotted himself 60% of the front seat and only allowed to pass it 40 because it's not used that often. Or like whatever it is. But the idea that, in some respects, he's not wrong.
But, and that's one thing that gets into when we pretend Batman doesn't have superpowers. His greatest superpower is also his greatest weakness, right? Which is that he has to be in the driver's seat. He is, his power is in the ultra preparation, but he prepares so much to take people out that he can't trust anyone. In many different storylines, it ruins his relationships, particularly with Selena Kyle, when she goes through so much to, try to be with him, but then she finds out he's investigating her because he doesn't really trust her. Or, in the Injustice storyline, I know that there's a part where Batman comes at odds with the Justice League, and he momentarily immobilizes Cyborg with a computer virus, and then they later discover that he uploaded the computer virus into Cyborg's system like a month after they met, just in case he ever needed to take him out. And that's his friend, right? So that's both his ability, super ability, but also his weakness that keeps him lonely and that keeps him hurt.
Yeah.
Right?
And again, a little bit of an overlap with Tony, right? I've got the tech, I've got the toys, and I've also got a raging ball of trust issues.
Yes. When as Batman is kind of going through and confronting this whole thing, one of the things I thought was very interesting, you and I have talked a lot about this, which is my own aversion to Crime Alley, and being like, oh, let's see Batman's parents get shot again. Well, so in this run, we do get to see Batman's parents get shot again. However, this takes a whole different meaning, and they actually do something interesting with it that I have never seen done before, which is we get to learn a little more about the effects of that murder upon the murderer.
Yeah. And that was the part that I found that was really interesting about it, because it was that thing that on one way, stereotypically, you get your opening thing here where it's in the middle of something and blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden there's, oh God, okay, we're only how many pages in? And oh geez, back at the theater, pearls.
Mask of Zorro, here we go. Gotham's loving millionaire parents.
And so that did give me a twitch, but like you say, they did something different with it later on. And in terms of the impact and interesting that how it goes to a redemption arc, and that puts Batman in that place where he's, literally saving the person that killed his parents, because that person actually had guilt and remorse. And you do get this, a redemption arc. And then again, the idea that how that then again plays out as far as how the Joker's seeing it, viewing it, and whatnot. And again, part of the larger, yes, I'm again Heath Ledger. I'm chaos, but at the same time, here's my timeline. You're kind of like doing the whole like, buddy, are you like a project manager? Like, when you take the makeup off,
sure comedian is the you're not really like the the logistics coordinator. That's the fourth Joker.
Yeah, exactly. Like you're waiting for like where was the drawing of like the big, decision tree and timeline on a back wall somewhere in one of those in one of the layers.
Well, and this is perhaps the biggest kind of I don't know if you call it the emotional crux of the whole thing, is where they discover that this quest for the perfect Joker and all these weird little Joker zombies that they're creating by torturing people and poisoning them. that he doesn't really want to turn Jason into a literal Joker, that he doesn't really want to make a perfect Joker. In fact, the Joker is sick of these other two Jokers, and this isn't fun anymore for him. And what he really wants is to give Batman this really messed up trauma therapy and have him heal things, have him discover that Joe Chill has been writing unsent apology letters for decades, that Joe Chill's tortured by this, even before he was diagnosed with cancer, to engineer a way for Batman to have to rescue and save Joe Chill's life.
Yeah.
And then confronting him at the end, there's this chilling and very interesting like dialogue in a police van where Batman's like, why, what are you doing? You know? And the Joker essentially says like, no, I'm supposed to be the only one that can hurt you that badly.
Yeah. Yeah. The idea that I've literally got to be the center of your world. And this is why.
You. Right.
Yeah.
I need you to heal from this trauma so that I can re-traumatize you now.
Yeah. It's the whole, like, you know, why kick a guy when he's down? Wait till he's on his knees. You got a better shot. Or again, very much like, again, if you think about stuff that's happened in, you know, in terms of like war crimes and stuff like that, that idea of, well, we're not torturing this person to kill them. We're torturing them to a certain point to then heal them so that we can go back and do the thing. And you're just like, okay, again, the layers have messed up. And just that idea that, I mean, when you realize a certain part of his madness is actually his obsession with Batman, that effectively he needs to be the center of Batman's world in some way, shape, or form. And that it's and again, strikes me as kind of, again, what you see in certain kinds of narcissistic abuse situations where somebody is, you know, they're simultaneous, they find a way of creating a pattern where they're simultaneously the abuser and the rescuer. And that's what keeps the loop going. And you're just like, holy, again, the layers have messed up here. And the layers of, again, that weird chaos / highly organized.
It's an amazing concept to see, you know, here Batman is actually embarking on a therapeutic discovery of his own to say, because this isn't just laid out to him. He is manipulated into investigating Joe Chill's fingerprints, I think are planted on
planted,
right? Yeah, on one of the murder weapons and things. And so he actually is the one, Batman is the one who goes digging and talks to like the prison shrink or doctor and basically discovers that, you know, pretty much early on into this incarceration, you know, this person had a real legitimate rehabilitative, like regret, amends, whatever you want to say.
It was remorseful because they realized the person that they, you know, that they realized who they killed and actually recognized the trauma that they had inflicted on Bruce. Like the idea was, I was going to get these folks because they had all these things that I didn't. I was going to take them out. And then it's like, oh, but then you were there. And then after, again, then I found out actually who they were, and they were philanthropists, and they were, you know, oops, I got it wrong. They weren't the big bads that I thought they were.
Absolutely.
And now I left you an orphan, and I never had the chance to say sorry. And, you know, and I've been regretting it. And so, yeah, that idea that information, you know, was not something that was ever given to, you know, Bruce as a child, when maybe, you know, had he been able to address and adapt some of these things, you know, you might not have had the Batman kind of thing.
Right.
And
it's very interesting to see that in a story, and it hit me weirdly to read that and to think about in a storyline that is famously you could say, you know, manipulative use of psychological, you know, storytelling to say, oh, here's this person. But the storylines in Batman love to showcase the psychology of the rogues gallery, right? Here's this person who's so twisted that they turned into the Mad Hatter. And then, you know, it's like a weird bastardization of mental health that is used in storytelling to say, you know, have we ever gone into, you know, when have we gone into the psychology of Joe Chill? And here's the effect that the trauma of committing this murder and of being so wrong about people and saying, I thought they were the villains in my life and I was the villain. And that's a traumatic realization. And then to try to say, and now I have to live the whole rest of my, however many years and decades it's been since doing that in one way or another. And, you know, paying for what I did, and obviously never getting really out of incarceration, but knowing there's someone out there who I've hurt this badly, and just that whole thing, to not have gone there until this, it was very, very, very interesting.
Yeah.
I also thought it was an interesting choice in the storytelling to say, here's Batman confronted with Jason committing, and it's certainly not the first time Jason's killed anybody, but a straight up execution murder, and to have to confront that and say, well, he's in so much pain, and I have to look at him and understand where he's coming from, then to be confronted with the same exact opportunity to have understanding towards his parents' murderer.
Yeah.
Right? It's a very interesting progression of events. I don't know if the Joker's plan accommodated for that, but if we could see his spreadsheet, it might be on there.
Yeah.
You never know. But to have that play out that way was fascinating. And there's a couple of panels that really sort of drive this home too. When you look at the panel where he saves Joe Chill as Batman, and he looks at him, and Chill is like, I know who you are. I hear the people talk about you. You're Batman. Thank you. And then there's this pause, and he's like, you're welcome. For that exchange, say, thank you for saving my life. You're welcome. And then we cut to also, later, as there's the other things going on, we get to see him visiting again as Bruce Wayne at the literal deathbed, sitting at the literal deathbed. Yeah. And then later at the graveside of Joe Chill, as this is Bruce, not Batsy, who's there making amends and peace and shaking hands with him or whatever.
Which is, again, not something that you see or is ever, alluded to. It's always just, here's this bad thing that happened and a bad person did it to him. And again, it's in a sense provided his, not just a justification, but is literally his raison d'etre kind of thing. Like, this is why he exists. And so his justification. And so to have that thing happen where he's got the closure that in some respects he's never given, and that it's on a positive healing note, as opposed to some kind of confirmation of, yes, we, it was just really interesting, because it was that thing, again, when you think about, this is the thing that made him. And that's the other part too, is there's so many references to people being made, or identities being made, or again, the role of mask and identity, and even the whole, like, finding out who the Joker's real identity is.
Yes.
And then finding out at the end, it's like, I've known since, like, what was he said, like 2 weeks in or something, and then nobody can. And then there's this whole
wonderful little twist. Yeah.
He's basically saved the Joker's family from him eons ago. Yeah. This is not necessarily the big mystery that everybody thinks it is, but like so many of the other things where it's pretending to not know a thing or to know a person, alternate identity, only knowing their mask thing. Like, this is just one more of the things that Bruce has to do. And whatever comes with it. So again, fits into his larger thing and kind of represents his own little version of healing. But at the same time, we know that there's still so many other unhealed things going on. It's not going to be like, oh, so he wrapped things up with Joe Chill, and that family in Alaska is fine. He's just going to hang up the cape, nobody's reading this and going, is this the farewell to Batman that we,
No, it's, when you discover in the end, and it's a great, I always enjoy when a story can break the rules that I usually like and still make me like it. And I'm one of those that I prefer. One of the things that I just wasn't sort of mentally turned on by the concept of the Joaquin Phoenix Joker movie. And then since then, it's like, I don't know, it's just not my, whatever. I'm not necessarily going to dig into all the reasons, but it's not my thing. And not my take on the Joker, because I actually prefer the Joker to not have a backstory. He's scarier that way. That's one of the brilliances of The Dark Knight, is like, who is this guy? He told us a backstory, literally scarring backstory. Oh wait, he made that up? He's just messing with everybody with his backstory, And so that's much scarier. So they break that rule, and it's like, oh, here actually he is somebody. He has his abusive husband, obviously, And I think Harley Quinn would tell you that. But to say like, but he has a former, spouse and a child living somewhere hidden, right? Obviously, probably, I think the implication is that some friends and neighborhood cops raised some money for her to be able to move, and they lied to him about her death. I would imagine that if you tracked her finances in there, you'd find some corporation that was owned by maybe Wayne Co. I don't know. But
there's somebody making monthly deposits, right, or that there's a trust fund or something that may have Bruce's fingerprints on them. Yeah,
with turtlenecked Bruce Wayne standing outside their house to check on them. In the end, I think probably there's some investment there somewhere. But yeah, and to have that actual revelation where I think he tells what he's for like, okay, come on. Of course I know who he's like. I'm I think he literally says like, I don't want to be a jerk, but I'm Batman. Come on. I know who the Joker is. I'm not, who do you think you're talking to here? But that doesn't matter really. I'm just protecting these people. Yeah.
Well, and similar to the other part about the, how do we resolve this issue? Because, certain solutions involve unmasking. And so what things are you, for the greater good, what secrets are you willing to keep? What I won't say necessarily lies that you're willing to tell, but truths are you, just avoiding, not speaking, not saying, like it's a, somebody might call it like a lie of omission kind of thing. But the idea of which kinds of these things that may not necessarily be within his larger moral scope. Right. What are those things that I have to do for that greater good that I wouldn't want to do otherwise? Or again,
how many other Bruce Wayne funded witness protections are there out there or something? And that's an element. I think an element that is kind of forgotten sometimes in the small window that we're able to see in movies is that this is a whole like sort of foundation and almost franchise to where Batman's linked around the globe with all these different things and all these different things he's doing to sort of help people. It is interesting when you see the personalities that come in, like when Barbara Gordon is like, well, we have to turn him in. And you remember she comes from a family of cops, right? She's a cop kind of more than he is. And Batman's more of a psychopath. No, he's someone who has a sociopathic break from the rules of society. That's why he's the other side of the coin that the Joker is on, the good and evil coin, and Batman's on the other side where he doesn't. Yeah. His rules are only his rules of his own morality.
Yeah. And that the larger society, while they have rules and they're meant to do certain things, they keep dropping the ball in the following places. So I've come up with my own code of ethics, and that while there may be some places where it overlaps, again, I won't murder people. There's other places where it's like, yes, but I have free reign to do the following things because the current system doesn't work. And I think that's even where his trust issues come in, because it's the whole, well, yes, technically there are laws on the book, and yes, there are police and there are all these things, but things get corrupted, they get abused, they get this, they get that, even by people that are, standing, on a podium and acting like they're the most morally correct person. Meanwhile, they're the head of what criminal organization, like those kinds of things where it's that, he's seen enough of the hypocrisy that it's like, yes, I have my tight circle. I sometimes monitor them. I do these other things because I trust me more than I trust these other people. And then I like, what was the movie? Was it Meet the Fockers, where it was the circle of trust thing? Like Batman's circle of trust, extends about as far as his cape goes. Right. And it's like
kind of Alfred, and the rest of you might think you're in it, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But in the same way that my cape goes in and out, you may or may not be in the circle in any given 5-minute window based on what you've,
and to that pathological degree. And that's where I think sometimes people, for me in fiction and in storytelling, I don't find it necessary to be a Batman stan in the form of not everything Batman does is right. It would be sort of terrifying it would be very terrifying in real life for one person to be that powerful. And he does not, in the comics, of course, the other superpower that people like Batman or Superman have is that they are correct often. They're usually correct in the way they do things. And without that, that's why it wouldn't work in the real world. We don't exalt a vigilantism that way in the real world, because someone's not always correct in who they're punching. Right.
Well, and this is exactly it, that it's like it's something that you can explore in these, creative fields, because it's a universe that, you can control, and it's not the thing, so and I think that was, again, when we talked about the movie before, was the implications of, they kind of threw a little bit of that real world aspect in when you saw where it's the, Batman and I am vengeance. And then it's like, oh, wait a second, I created the Riddler. Oops. Like, they kind of tapped into that. This is why we don't let this happen. This is why it stays on the screen on the page.
Exactly.
Because the copycat thing,
also storylines that you'll find, I think, that experiment with this idea that, oh, wait, I mean, Batman White Knight is all about that idea that there's things that Batman is holding out on and wanting to preserve about his own power that is actually wrong, ultimately, that he's like, I'm doing things abusively at times. I'm doing things that are not right, and that's always an interesting idea to play around with. So, I mean, overall, I'd say, putting this out there, I guess it's probably a little obvious that I'd recommend it. I mean, it'd be weird if at the end of this glowing, like, love letter that I'm writing to the three Jokers, that I'm like, no, it sucked. But it's quite good and interesting, I think, for certainly anybody who would listen to this episode. If you haven't read it, you probably would like it.
I absolutely, and I think it is. I mean, on one level, yes, it's it is a deeper, darker. Like, again, you're not getting Cesar Romero here. Not the one. Like, again, I've introduced my kids to comics and graphic novels, and this is right next to Deadpool in the list of things I don't read to my granddaughter. Sorry, honey, you're not allowed to touch that one on Grandma's comic shelf. Hold on, let me pull out, Stardust or something, that kind of thing. So, but it's awesome, and I think for folks that, maybe their exposure to, whether again it's DC, Marvel, these kinds of things, where it's been mostly through the movies, and especially that difference of, like, again, why is a Heath Ledger Joker different than an old, Nicholson or Cesar Romero or Joaquin Phoenix? It's like, this is a really nice, like, intro and kind of a place to, like, this would again be one of those places where it's like, if you want to start going down the rabbit hole, like, this would be a good one. Just like, again, Dark Knight, Killing Joke, some of the other ones we've talked about, where they're really good launching off points. If that's not an area that you're familiar with. And again, I think it was awesome. I also, and I hadn't realized this till I read the bio, as a Canadian, I'm like super pumped that, one person is a Detroit person, but the writer, but then Jason Fabok and Brad Anderson are both Canadians.
Oh,
so one's from Kingsville, Ontario, and then the other one is also from Ontario, originally from Kenora, which is like is cottage country for us. So I've been through Kenora a bajillion times, and in my life, it's a wonderful, area to go camping, fishing, and whatnot. I'm like, okay, so we got some local boys. And I think that's the other part that I have to say that I love about this genre, and so is watching how many different it does bring people together. And as much as we might think of the comic book industry being, those kinds of things that, they're located in the New Yorks and Los Angeleses of the world, they are really mediums that have allowed for a lot of collaboration in ways that I think predates the kinds of collaborations that we would later see in movies and cinematic stuff, where they do tend to be a little bit more of, again, that Hollywood LA kind of thing. So yeah, I've seen a lot of Canadian friends. I've got a friend that recently was one of the artists for Marvel's Pride series. And again, somebody I know locally that's illustrated some stuff for some friends and that kind of stuff. So I think that's the other part too, is this is a really, again, from an artistry and a story perspective, definitely a rave review. Yeah.
Yeah, we didn't even get into the art of it all, but yeah, that's beautifully drawn comic.
Beautiful. And then in some of the cases where it's like, oh, you did that a little too well.
Hold horrifying, right? Yeah.
Might lose my lunch there. Not gonna stare at that frame too long. Got the message. Moving on.
Yes.
Flip the page.
Well, before we go for today, tell everybody what they can find at Speak Up. What's going on at Speak Up and with your project?
Oh gosh, well, again, some more partnerships and things happening there, and again, the programs are still going. So again, that opportunity to use the deep dive on whether it is the, again, the wonderful world of superheroes to help us reframe, and looking forward to, fingers crossed, got the abstracts in for a couple more papers related to BTS, mental health, and a few other things, and hopefully some trips to Korea lined up to present those. So, and that's another area that's been expanding as well. And
it seems like you've been doing more and more with that, right? Yeah.
It's really interesting. That's been the place. There's an area, and I mean, I know we have as a former academic, I know we have fan studies stuff that covers this, but rarely is there so much within fan studies. Yes, different fandoms will be talked about, but it's often like things about cosplay or things about. There's an entire academic realm of what are called Bangtang scholars, and an entire academic field just on BTS. So it's within, and again, within a broader K-pop, K-culture, Hallyu studies. So no, it's interesting, and been really lucky to meet some other, again, folks that would fit into our world of the idea that there are wonderful creative mediums that can positively and empoweringly talk about mental health, psychology, all these different things in a way that makes them accessible, and does so in a way that can be enlightening, as well as, have the potential for destigmatizing. And so to me, that's so much of it, is that opening that door and being able to have conversations where you're not just laden with chapters and quotes out of the DSMV or something like that. It's like real people talking about real stuff. And sometimes, yes, it takes exaggerated characters to articulate that, but in the reality is, these are just over the top accentuated versions of a lot of real life. It's just with a little bit more gore and flair. So yeah, no, just still doing the same stuff, and looking forward to putting a few more things out there. And again, always looking forward to working with you. In fact, I got a couple ideas I want to run with you on. After
this is going to be great.
Once we hit the pause button.
Awesome, and that's a great thing.
Mind the spoiler rule. We have like our.
Exactly. We got to have, right. We got to, it's a tease. It's good to end on a tease, though, so everybody out there can know there's more coming. So thanks, Sharon. And thanks everybody out there for listening. And yeah, check out the Three Jokers.
Cool.
Thank you for listening to the Court Arts Podcast Network. To listen to more Court Arts shows, visit courtemparts.com.